with your masquerading and you always contemplating what to do in case happiness found you. Hey, come on, baby, follow me. I'm the pipeline. Follow me. I'm the pipeline, and I'll show you where it's at.
I'm joined by Chris Hicken, who is the founder and CEO of Nuff Said. How are you?
Doing great, Garrett. Thanks for having me on the show. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I like the company name, Nuff Said. Where did you get that from?
Yeah, we did a lot of market research picking the name for this company. We wanted names that had something to do with information and communication. So we tested about 24 names, and Nuff Said was the clear winner, but probably not for the reason that you'd expect. Nuff Said got almost 100% polarity on responses. Either people loved it or hated it. And for me, as long as you have some kind of an emotional reaction to the name, I'm a fan. So the fact that half the people hated it, I was delighted with. So that's how we arrived at the name.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, kids hate that word, Nuff Said. I know it when
Perfect. I love it.
That's Enough Said. All right. So why did you start the company and where did the idea come from?
Yeah, the idea, so the genesis of the idea happened when I was at User Testing, which was the previous company I worked at. I was president and COO there for about 8 years. User Testing, an enterprise software company. We actually, interestingly, interacted quite frequently with Qualtrics, which is another company kind of in the customer experience space located in Provo. I'm sure you've covered them many times on the program. So at User Testing, what I found was over time, people were spending more and more hours in the office, sometimes 12, 13, 14 hours a day, but people were getting less done than they ever had. And when I started spending time coaching people, what I realized was that people were being bombarded with information and distractions and notifications. And it was really hard for people to focus on the work that mattered for their job. And so I started thinking, like, would it be possible to build software to help do some of the coaching that I'm doing with people individually to help them, look at their entire workspace and then prioritize the stuff that mattered for their job. So that's where the idea came from. And, after I came up with the idea, I started pitching the idea to investors before I had done any work on it, just to see how they reacted to it. And it was kind of overwhelmingly positive. So that's kind of what led me to get the company started.
All right. So give us some examples of how it will work and currently does work to improve people's workflow and ultimately their lives, right? If you get more done faster, quicker, you're generally happier.
So I'm going to take us all the way back to the problem again, which is the problem is that we are overloaded with information and communication at work. And that's coming from email, chat, SMS, LinkedIn, updates, newsletters, notifications, the dog barking in the background, the baby who needs the attention. All these things need our attention. And the human brain isn't good at looking at 50 different things and figuring out the one that matters. There's a whole category of companies who see this problem and are attempting to solve it. So that category is called productivity apps or productivity tools. And the goal of most productivity apps is to help you get more stuff done in your day. And my view on productivity and what I've seen as an executive is that giving people productivity tools means that rather than getting 20 useless things done in their day, they're going to get 25 useless things done in their day. So in that respect, I have very little interest in solving a productivity problem. But what I'm really interested in doing is helping people solve the problem of focusing on the work that matters. So our vision for the company is to build an AI-powered brain that sits on your shoulder, understands who you are at work, what department you're in, what your goals are, and with that understanding helps you to focus on the work that matters. So that context is important, because now I'll answer your question, which is how will it actually work? So the way it works is there's kind of two parts. The first step is you sign up for Enough Said on the site. We allow you to integrate your main work apps. So you can connect your email, all of your email accounts, all of your chat accounts, your calendar, your tasks, all into a single workspace. So now you have everything in one single feed, and all of the information that's coming into your workspace is prioritized for you automatically into a couple of different buckets. Most importantly, though, there's a bucket at the top called urgent. So anything that needs your attention right now is automatically prioritized for you there. So this could be meetings or tasks or messages. Then once you're in that product and using that on a regular basis, you can add on a Teams module for your department. And by the way, the first module that we're building is for customer success or account management. When you plug in the Team module, Enough Said integrates with additional apps in your department's normal workflow. So in the case of customer success, we're integrating with your CRM, which might be Salesforce, with your customer support tool, which might be something like Zendesk, with your product ticketing module, which might be something like Jira. And then that product, the brain synthesizes all that information in real time to help you feed you information, which is tasks, alerts, and activities that you need to do right now to reduce risk in your portfolio. So that kind of completes the picture. You know, we in terms of category, we call ourselves a workflow intelligence company, which is kind of a new category because we're not workflow and we're not just intelligence. We're actually the combination of the two together. So help you prioritize your workflow, but also help you think about what matters for your job.
Yeah. So you've decided to tackle a pretty big bear.
We're going after a really big problem. Yeah, which is part of the reason why we had to raise so much money up front to get this thing launched.
Yeah. All right. Well, it sounds great. And I'm, visualizing all the stuff that we use, and we're just a small nonprofit, and I can imagine that there's, poor saps out there that have 15, 20, maybe even more.
Very common. And if you think about the life of someone in sales or customer success, for example, who are focusing early on, not only do they have to deal with many different communication channels, they're also having to deal with actively manage 50, 100, sometimes more relationships at a time.
Yeah. Both, customers, current, former, and then employees.
Perspective and employees. That's right.
Yeah. Wow. Cool. So how did you get your start in software development, software engineering?
So it's kind of an interesting story. On LinkedIn, I put that I was born an artist, schooled in engineering, and have worked as a business leader. I actually thought I was going to be an artist. So I kind of my regular activity at home growing up was drawing and painting. And then when I applied to colleges, and by the way, so I was also interested in computers as well, but when I applied to colleges, half of them I applied for an art degree and half I applied for a computer science degree. And I ended up getting into Cal Poly, which was my favorite school. It's a technical school in California. And I ended up studying computer science, but that itch for art still was with me. And so my first job out of college was I basically ran the website for a company called headsets.com at the time. And so I was both doing, front and back end engineering, but I was also doing all the design for the site as well. So that the entire site was designed by me. So that's how I got my start in computer science and programming. And I think one of the things that I realized early on was that although I was a good developer, I wasn't the best, and it was going to be really hard for me to be the best. So that's when I started kind of looking for other ways where I could make contributions and be one of the best out there. And that's where I ended up landing in kind of just general company building and ops. And so I was general manager at headsets.com and then president and COO at User Testing.
Wow. So you're a Swiss Army knife in regards to you can design and build, and that probably helps you as the CEO and founder of a software company.
It does. It lets me have technical conversations fluently with engineers, but I have to say, I do have two world-class partners, co-founders at Enough Said, Nick, who is my head of partner and head of product, and Hari, who is my partner and head of engineering. They manage all the product and engineering, and they're just, I mean, they're as good as I am. They are way better.
Awesome. Cool. So over the years, you've done a lot with startups and growing companies, and you've been a mentor and advisor to several in the past and currently. And then I would assume you have mentors and advisors yourself. So how does that work when you're able to live in both worlds, where you're able to help people, give them advice and mentorship, and then how do you kind of receive it when it's your turn to learn?
Well, let's start with the second part of the question first. So my philosophy on mentorship is, and I learned this from actually one of my mentors, which is it's really good to have three different types of mentors. One mentor is your age doing something similar to you. That person's important because you can have kind of real talk about, what's happening in life, what are some of the current tactical challenges that you're encountering. You can vent frustrations, you can solve problems together. And so you want to have someone who's about your age or about your level of experience. And then you want another mentor who has the next job that you want. So this person might be 3 to 5 years ahead of you. And this person is going to help you navigate and see around some early corners that you just can't see in your current role, to help you avoid pitfalls, to help you think strategically about how to grow your career. And then the third mentor that you need is someone who's much, much older and experienced, someone who's like, who can call you a child, with a smile, and put life into perspective, the kind of the big picture perspective of like, I know you're focused in on work right now, but this is what the whole world has to offer, and this is how you should think about, valuing different things in life. So I've organized my mentoring life around those three concepts. So I have a couple of people my age, a couple of people that are ahead of me, and then three guys who are much older than me. And I do, in terms of how I schedule those, I've got regular either monthly or quarterly meetings scheduled to meet with those people. And it just makes it easy to remember to have those conversations. One of the best investments I've made in my entire life, learning from other people's experiences. In terms of giving advice, I find that I have offered to be a mentor for a lot of people. Most folks aren't willing to set up the regular meeting cadence. And so most of the coaching I end up doing is via existing programs where mentorship is already in place and expected and provided for the mentees. So I'm a mentor, for example, at Acceleprise, which is an early stage B2B accelerator based out of, well, they actually have offices all over the country. Cal Poly has an accelerator program, so I do some mentorship there. And then regularly I'm referred entrepreneurs who want help thinking through fundraising or how to select an investor or how to think about go-to-market strategy. So fundraising is one of the things that I'm kind of best at. And so a lot of the mentorship that I give to early stage founders is just, how do you think about raising money, especially in the early stages?
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, it's always interesting with the older mentors, because they either don't give a damn anymore, and so it's really accurate and candid, or they can actually be pretty helpful and guiding, because they've made a lot of mistakes and done a lot of things right as well. So the guesswork's kind of taken out a little bit.
What I love about the older mentors, which are both for me, both men and women, is they can tell you you're an idiot and not have to worry about protecting your ego. And you just need a little dose of that on a regular basis so that you don't get too full of yourself. And they can do it in only a way that, like you said, someone who's, been there, done that, is retired, they've made it. Only that personality type can give you that kind of feedback.
Yeah, it's really good. So in some of your other writings on your website, you've got a diagram of power users and champions, but I'll let people find that on their own. But what products, I guess technical and then maybe even non-technical, like consumer goods or something, are you a power user of?
Yeah. I so because of my natural orientation around organization, I am a power user of all of the existing productivity tools. So anything having to do with communication, so Gmail, Slack. I've used all of the different tasking tools, Microsoft To Do, Asana, Wunderlist, Trello, whatever my current tasking tool is. I'm a superpower user of, and of course, because I'm an artist, I'm a superpower user of a bunch of the Adobe products. So, um, you know, Adobe Photoshop, XD, Illustrator. I'm really strong in those as well. And of course, um, you know, have, because of my previous role, I'm also pretty strong in Excel, building models and really complex spreadsheets.
Yeah. And then are there any that you're glad you don't use anymore?
um, well, uh, most products that I start using, I stop using. So I would say 90% of them, there's nothing that stands out, but if there's a product that I'm trying that's not working for me, I drop it pretty quickly and don't invest too much time. So I don't really have any hate relationships with any of those products because I don't invest enough time to get to that point.
Yeah, that's good. All right. So on the flip side, who are going to be the champions of Nuff Said?
So, this vision that I talked about of building AI powered brains for the world, it's too big of a problem for an early stage company to solve for everyone. So we have to focus. And the first brain that we're building is for the customer success or account management department. And so our initial champions for this product will be people who do those roles. So specifically customer success managers, directors of customer success, and then we'll do a lot of our sales into the top leaders of that function, which would be chief customer officers and VPs of customer success. So those are the folks that we expect to be the initial big champions for Nuff Said.
Yeah. And I guess you're like, you've seen it happen a bunch, and I have as well, where there will be a bunch of people using something and then they start chirping up, and the poor person being chirped at eventually capitulates or uh, and I found that works a lot better. I've been on both sides where it's like, okay, here's the credit card, we can try that
Yep.
as well. But I like the upsurge and the upswell a little bit better than.
And here's the thing: our kind of personal product, that we're building for personal use, will be, very inexpensive. So anyone who wants to use it can try it for, low risk. The team's product, the AI powered brain, will be more expensive, but of course we'll be selling that into a VP, and they've got quite a bit more budget.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting, and it's cool that you've kind of dialed in and broken down who's going to buy what, when, and how, and where, and there's definitely a process to it. So we've talked about a lot of things, a lot of tools, and a lot of experience that you've garnered over the years, and I'd be interested in, just you with your brain. You can't use your AI tools or anything. How you eventually, compartmentalize how you're going to absorb all of this information. Because a lot of times it's contradictory from people that you like and respect. This is the way you do it. I guarantee this is the way you do it. And then somebody else is like, I guarantee this is the way. So you're trying to solve that problem for a lot of people, and maybe it's not a problem, but how do you eventually decide what path you're going to follow?
Yeah, you're kind of, yeah. This is the problem where you get polar opposite advice from successful people, and you have to figure out which path to go down, right? So yeah, and then of course, I mean, that's kind of like, as a CEO, and certainly you probably have a lot of founders listening to this, one of the most common scenarios that happens. And I think what I try to do is understand the context from which the advice is coming from. So, for example, I look at it, is this person giving me advice because they grew an SMB business, or they grew an enterprise business? Were they selling into the engineering department, or maybe they're selling into the marketing department? Are they a fast growing company, so they had to cut some corners or not? What industry are they coming from? What region of the country were they building the company? So I just try to I mean, I like to learn from everyone's experiences. So I certainly listen to and accept the feedback. And then I just try to do as good of a job as I can mapping the feedback back to the situation that we're in. So, for example, we're selling enterprise software into a customer success team. So I'd look for feedback that most closely aligns with that profile of a person, while still listening to and understanding the experiences of people who maybe had a little bit of a different experience or playbook.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I'm sure, like most people, you've got friends or colleagues that you'll just do opposite of what they say, because often they're wrong. And
I mean,
as well.
there's always a nugget of something valuable, even if the advice is terrible. There's always a nugget of something valuable in it. So I always take them a moment to listen, understand their perspective, and see what I can learn from them. Even if I'm going to discard 90% of it, there's usually some nugget in there that's worth remembering for the future.
Yeah, good point. You guys have an interesting philosophy on one-on-one meetings. And again, you've written about that, but I'd be interested to get your thoughts on how you came to kind of that model and what value you derive from it.
So it started with this idea that we felt like the company was going to be largely remote, meaning that we weren't going to have very large centralized offices. So we needed a way to keep people connected in with the company, the culture, the values of the company. And then, of course, with COVID, it just became even more important to have this meeting structure. So we spent a lot of time, and we pulled in, best practices from my experience at Nuffsaid, and my partner Nick and Hurry brought in best practices from their experiences at Google and from large consulting firms. So we came up with this, what I think is a pretty good meeting format. And so we call our one-on-one meetings syzygies, which is an alignment of three celestial bodies, in this case, employee, manager, and company. And what we're trying to do is get everybody on the same page about what's happening in the company. And so there's kind of, the way that we have it structured is it's a 30-minute meeting once a month. And by the way, that's important that it's important that it's once a month, because if you do it too frequently, it becomes mundane and you don't end up getting enough new information. If you go longer than a month, you can have issues that start to percolate and you're not addressing them quickly enough. So the month is the right cadence for us. And then the meeting itself has three different components. It's look around and see how things are going right now at the company. So what's the state of the union and how's everybody feeling? 2 is to look back at how the person has performed over the last month. And then 3 is to look forward at what's to come and what's needed for the next month, in between this syzygy and the next one. So in the look around section, we give some private time where the teammate can share whatever they want with their manager, and it's private. So none of that information is shared. And we're asking questions like, I'll just give you a couple of examples. What's on your mind about the company from the last few weeks? What are concerns or frustrations that you want to share? If you were me, what changes would you make? How are you doing overall since the last time that we met? So all of that information is private. Then we pull up our core values document and we ask people to look at the core values and ask how, as a company, we're performing relative to our core values. And then we have an executive feedback form. So we pull up a feedback form and we let the person, the teammate, share any frustrations that they have with the executive team. All that feedback is entered into a survey feedback form, and all of it is anonymous. So then that's kind of part number one. And by the way, so that feeds back to us regularly things that need to change or be improved about the company. So we're getting this kind of constant feedback loop. Section number two is to look back. So in the last month, how did things go? So we asked people about both their engagement with the company over the last month and their performance. So we're looking for frustrations that have perked up. We want to address any performance challenges, and also if it looks like the person's losing engagement, we want to understand that quickly. So some of the questions we ask are things like, do you have the opportunity to do your best work here? Are you proud to work for Enough Said? Do you rarely think about looking for another job at another company? So those questions come up. And then on the performance side, we're asking things like, share a couple of performance highlights, and if there have been any misses along the way, the manager has an opportunity to call those out as well. And the last piece is look forward. The main thing that we're talking about here is, what are you blocked on? So let's make sure that those things get unblocked right away. And then we talk about long-term goals and career. So every month, everyone has the opportunity to look at and evaluate their career. Are they making progress towards their personal career goals? Everything is documented in a single spreadsheet. And so it also gives each person the opportunity to ask for a promotion or a raise, or if they feel like they've done something exceptional and they've earned some kind of recognition. So that's how we've structured these. We've been doing them for about 1.5 years. They are really a really core part of our culture now. I don't know if this would work for everybody, but it works really well for us.
Yeah, it sounds great, and it covers a wide swath and doesn't leave too many stones unturned. Could be some crying every once in a while, or voice.
There could be. If there is, it happens in the private section that I haven't heard about.
Yeah, the private section is probably the funnest.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's like sometimes you ask somebody how their day's going, and then 30 minutes later,
the meeting starts, right?
Like, oh boy, you've got things going on.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. And so at what point, is it, you're a manager of 10 employees? Is that manageable for your meetings? At what point do you have too many?
We have a target of 7 direct reports with a max of 10. If you get to 10, we figure out a way to restructure.
Okay. And then so for you, your direct reports, do you decide, tactically, or is it just the normal org chart? Do you pick and choose?
What do you mean by that? Are you asking if in my one-on-ones I talk about tactics with my direct reports?
No, like, the CEO usually would be the CFO, COO, and CMO, but do you go further down and have direct reports that I guess aren't direct reports, but you might want to hear from them?
Oh, I see. Yeah, so like skip function meetings. Yeah, the way that we handle that is we've created a couple of spaces for people to interact with executives in the company. The first one is we have a company questions and updates channel within Slack where anyone can post any questions, and everyone on the exec team is monitoring that. So if you have a question that comes up, a concern, you can voice that there and get it addressed. We do a weekly water cooler meeting, which is the digital equivalent of running into someone in the morning at the water cooler on the way at the beginning of work when you're getting some coffee. So it's an informal way for everyone to get together and just talk about how everyone's doing personally. There's no work agenda at all. It's just time for people to connect the way that they would in a normal office.
Gotcha.
The third thing that we do is on a monthly basis, we do pizza nights. So the company pays, for anyone that wants, the company pays for you to order a pizza. And we spend an hour together just talking about how people are doing in life in general. Usually we have a couple of themes or interesting topics. So we'll pick a theme like, I don't know, skiing, and then we'll have a discussion about that. So there are ways for the exec team. We're building a culture where the exec team can get access to the entire company without having to have very formal step function meetings, and safe spaces for people to just talk about what's going on.
Cool. Awesome. And then you mentioned in your writings a 30-year relationship and why that's important for you and the company.
Yeah, so we have, you're talking about our core values, and our first core value in our values document is that we build 30-year relationships. And what, you know, the sentiment behind this is we're trying to communicate that we want to build career-long relationships with everyone at the company. And when you think about relationships that way, you really do treat people differently. And so the way that we've structured our values is, and by the way, one of my frustrations about most companies' values are that you don't know, you read the value and you don't know how you should act or behave differently because of the value. So you might see a company who has a value like, integrity or honesty, and it's like, okay, but what do I do about that? Like, how should I change the way that I behave at work to live up to this value? So the way that we address that in our core values is, in addition to each value statement, we provide, 4 to 5 statements of behaviors that we expect people to, to embody at work to live up to that core value. So I'll just read off for you the 3 behaviors that support building 30-year relationships. The first behavior is we seek to understand others' perspectives and contexts. And this helps, this kind of gets around the know-it-all who focuses on just sharing their own context and doesn't give a darn about anyone else. I don't know if you could swear on this podcast. We're going to keep it PG for now. The second one is we lead with good intent and assume others do as well. So same thing, people are going to say and do things that are going to piss you off at work. And rather than assuming that they're being jerks, you start by assuming good intent first and then explore that with that person. 3, we communicate very directly without judgment. This is probably for me the most important one. We want a culture where everything that needs to be said is always said, but not in a way that belittles or judges others. So we're not assholes about it. So, but we always communicate very directly with each other. 4, we share our strengths and weaknesses openly. This is driven very much by a guy named Pat Lencioni, wrote a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. He talks about how teams lose trust over time and how they build trust. And one of the ways that teams build trust is by being vulnerable with each other. And so we have a culture of kind of extreme openness about strengths and weaknesses. So extreme, actually, that all of the founders have drafted formal documents of their strengths and weaknesses and shared them publicly with the whole company. So anyone can read about our strengths and weaknesses.
Wow. Very cool.
And then the last one is we have fun and enjoy working together. So, we make an effort to play, have fun, make jokes, and enjoy. We spend so much time together at work. We want to make sure we do that. So with those 5 behaviors, we live up to the core value of building 30-year relationships.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And, even though you're an entrepreneur and CEO, you're way dialed in on the HR and,
well, yeah.
And relationships are interesting, right? You read one of those big biographies that are 500, 600, 700 pages, whether it's Rockefeller or Vanderbilt or whoever, and you wonder, how did the writer get all that information? And the answer is like tons of work and research and help. But it's those guys maintained relationships like you wouldn't believe, and it's all chronicled in their writings and their journals and their correspondence, back and forth, because it was really important to them, and one for, I think, a lot of them, morally, and they're kind of duty and honor bound to preserve friendships instead of burn the bridges down. And 2, it was very lucrative for them to have as many friends and as many places as possible, but they didn't get lazy, and and stop correspondence. I'm sure there was times where like, I don't want to write these 15 letters. They did, right?
Yep, that's right.
In a lot of ways. And I think we all benefit in reading about them because they did do that. And I think sometimes it's a lost art and people don't put the value on maintaining those. So I thought that was really cool what you guys are doing.
Well, let's just double click on those. I agree wholeheartedly with what you just said. How to win friends and influence people. Dale Carnegie's book. Vern Harnish wrote a book called The Rockefeller Habits. Great book. Totally worth reading about. And I would say even today, the best executives, the best CEOs and leaders, they do prioritize relationships. And they take time every week to make sure that they're dialing in those relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. And when somebody's good at it, right? Because you feel like, all right, I'm either loved or liked, or person's maintaining this relationship. And it's a big difference than, the guy that'll helicopter in every once in a while. And people perceive that. Cool. One or two more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. But you guys recently raised $8.3 million.
That's right.
And from a General Catalyst, Gradient Ventures, which is Google's AI fund, Global Founders Capital, one of our favorites, locally Kickstart, amongst others. And you've got, as with all things, it sounds like a process and a plan on how to do that and best practices. For those that are going to do that at some point in their life or sometime in the next year, what are some of the best tricks and systems that you followed to get that money?
Yeah, I actually, when I'm mentoring entrepreneur groups, we actually will dedicate a whole hour just to this topic. So we could spend a lot of time talking about this, but I'll just call out two things that I think are not intuitive for most early stage founders who are trying to raise money. So seed stage investing is different from every other stage because there's so little evidence in the market that your idea is any good. So the way that most founders pitch VCs at the seed stage is they go and they spend a lot of time talking about the product. The problem is that for VCs, they don't really understand your industry very well, and there's no evidence that your idea is any good. So they're left thinking like, okay, you have a cool product idea, so what? And so spending time on the product is probably the least valuable thing you can do in a pitch meeting, an early stage pitch meeting. But it's also the thing that most founders spend the most time on. So I think that's where most founders blow it on fundraising. The way that the two things that VCs are betting on in the early stage are how big is the market size that you're going after, and how good am I willing to bet on you as the entrepreneur to solve this problem? So those are, and for that reason, those are the two most valuable slides in the deck, and those should probably be your first two slides when you're doing a pitch to the VC. And by the way, usually those are tucked as like the last two slides of most presentations. And so in the market slide deck, it's what most founders do. Well, I'll just show it. The worst thing that you can do is say, Gardner so-and-so report said that this is a $9 billion industry growing 20% a year, because no one cares what Gartner or Deloitte or whoever had to write about this industry. It's not relevant to me making an investment decision. So don't give me that slide. All right, so that's what investors would say. The next worst thing that you could do is say, well, there are, 300,000 people in this space, and if I charge them on average $5 per month, then our total market size is this. That's also a super lame and lazy way to talk about market size. What investors really want to see is some deep thought that's been put into what the market is and how you're going to go after it. So a great market size slide says something like, okay, our first customer is very narrow. It's very targeted. Maybe it only has 10,000 people in it, but The reason why we're going after this market is because they have this really, really intense pain that we can solve better than anyone else on day one. So we're going to keep it really narrow for that reason. Then we're going to take the success, and maybe we can only build a $50 million company from that first group. But then we're going to take our success from that group, and then we're going to grow the market to this new set of users who are connected to the first set of users that we're going after. That expands our TAM to whatever. Then we can build a $200 million company off of that because they have this tangential problem that we'll be able to solve. And then we'll take our success from that group and expand to the third group of users, which is enormous. That's what allows us to enter into a $1 billion plus market. So that's the kind of thoughtfulness that will show investors that you have deeply considered who the customer is, what the problems are, how you're going to be bringing the product to market, and how this thing eventually becomes very, very big. And here's the other thing, another pitfall for a lot of founders. If you can't show a very clear path to a multi-billion-dollar market, you're going to get an immediate no. I'm not saying it's fair, it's just the reality. So if you're showing a $500 million market, even a $1 billion market, it's just too small. It's not big enough. You're not thinking big enough.
Yeah.
So that's number one. And so, for example, in my pitch deck, I have slide number 1 is introduce the team. Slide number 2 is market size. And that's how I raised, our big round.
Yeah. I like that. It slices it very deeply. And yeah, I've been on both sides of that, where I'm like, oh, here's the Gartner report, the bottom up. But when I have interns or people kind of pitch me on their ideas, or they'll come through here and I'll kick the tires on it. I had an interesting experience once that it's kind of a weird story, but a John Deere implement organization was going out of business and doing a big auction. So thousands of pieces of machinery as it relates to John Deere and harvesting food and moving dirt and equipment. And most people see a grain tractor, all right, that's John Deere tractor. And if there's a knife spinning in the front, then that probably get wheat or corn or something. And then if it's pulling something, it's plowing. But there was hundreds, if not thousands, of bolt-on implements and a bunch of other things that made farmers' lives easier. So I was kind of picturing, whether it was an entrepreneur within John Deere who wanted to throw this in the product line, or it was a farmer who kind of built a company based on knowing that, like, all right, here's my pain point. I might be a soybean farmer. It won't relate to corn or wheat, but I know there's 10,000 soybean farmers. And if I can get this sold to John Deere, then I can, keep going more and more. And my guess is that it was just intuitive for these guys. They knew it wasn't the world's biggest market, but it was definitely big enough, and that they could work on it once they had gotten that yes. It kind of opened my eyes to, just get in there and make it accurate to begin with, because you could do a total addressable market of everyone that needs to eat food, right? Like
That's right.
Big market. And so yeah, I think it's been going on for a long time, and I think you're spot on in that. If you really take the time and get that slide down, it'll show that you're not lazy and that you're actually thinking through it. So I really thought that was cool the way you phrased that. Well, cool. This has been really fun and informative. And last question. So you guys are based out of Palo Alto, but you also have a Utah office. What was the kind of the decision behind that, and what are your plans for that office going forward?
Yeah, so when I was at user testing, we interacted with the folks at Qualtrics quite a bit, and we were always jealous that they could hire someone who wouldn't be poached by Apple or Google or Facebook within 12 months. And for that reason, my wife and I were looking for a city outside of San Francisco to do company building. So, we were looking at Salt Lake City and Austin and Denver, and Salt Lake City kind of fell in our lap. My wife was the chief revenue officer of GetPrime, which was acquired by Pluralsight last year.
Yeah.
And when we came to Salt Lake City, we fell in love and decided to make this the place that we were going to build. And so while much of our product and engineering hiring will happen kind of around the world, we plan to do the bulk of our hiring for all the go-to-market functions here in Salt Lake City.
Cool. Well, we're glad to have you here locally, and appreciate your time being on the podcast today, and look forward to your guys' continued success. Love to have you on again a year and a half and see how it's gone for you.
Yeah, thanks. I also want to put in a plug, since we're here, put in a plug for Kickstart Ventures, who also invested in us. They are a Utah-based fund. They've been total rock stars for us. And so for any local founders who are thinking about pitching to early stage investors, definitely check out the team at Kickstart. They've been really amazing for us, and of course I've interacted with some of the biggest and some of the best funds in California, and I would put Kickstart right up there with anyone I've worked with in the past.
Cool. Yeah, they're great. We've worked with them a lot, and they've laid a solid foundation for seed investing here in Utah. All right. Well, thank you, Chris. Appreciate your time.
Thanks again, Garrett.